Okay, we're still 8 minutes away from going live, but is there anybody out there? Just testing to make sure we're in business here. If somebody's watching, would you please let me know? Narcio Nick. We've seen you before. Welcome. Hey, Gary Lazarus. Live and alive, the same. Thank you very much. Yeah, Jason, it's been a month. And Dan Mancuso. You know, I can't go anywhere without you, Dan. Always great to see you. Don Reeds. Greetings from Vermont. I am madly in love with Vermont maple syrup. Okay, so it looks like we're simulcasting. You know the routine, guys. If you've been here before, I just kind of check in. We're 7 minutes from officially pushing the launch button, and we're just making sure that we are simulcasting, because this technology is a bit confusing to humble little me. But it looks like we're up and running. I see that Nick is on Twitch and the rest of you are on Facebook. I'd like to see somebody from YouTube to know that we're really rocking it. But what's going on? Anybody got anything you want to, in the 6 minutes before we launch, want to talk about? Anybody got questions, comments, complaints? Keep it clean. Keep it free of politics, race, religion. Oh, geez, I want to talk race, religion, and politics. But, you know, I tell my team, I can't control what you say on social media. And if you want to tee off on politics and race, religion, go ahead. But let me give you one thought. I've been online, actively online, broadcasting, since the 90s, when AOL was the biggest thing online, when they were bigger than Facebook. Facebook hadn't even been invented yet. AOL was God. I mean, AOL owned Time Magazine, Sports Illustrated. AOL was huge. And in all those years that I've been involved in social media and online, I have never once seen somebody say, "Holy shit, man, your argument is so powerful, I've changed my mind." You know, just doesn't happen. All the ranting and raving that I see on Facebook and Twitter, it just doesn't seem to have much impact on anything other than making people mad. So I steer clear of it as much as I would like to spout. But we stick to food and mostly barbecue. And you know what? I think you like that. And yes, Gary, swearing is okay. What the fuck? Although, I don't, usually it's not necessary. Oh, Steve's making some late night gazpacho. This is the time of the year. Hey, my wife bottled her first tomato sauce of the year. She grows. My wife is a master gardener. The University of Illinois actually offers a certificate, a degree in master gardener. And she just finished her degree. And she's retired from the Food and Drug Administration as a food safety expert. And so now she's a master gardener. And as she has for many years, she grows lots of tomatoes and cans them. And she usually gets it so perfectly that she cans enough that it lasts a full year. So we eat her fresh tomato sauce all through winter and into the summer. And today she canned her first batch, maybe about a gallon, in small jars. And she'll do a couple of more batches. But she told me over dinner it was exactly 1 year ago to the date that she canned her first batch last year. So it's an annual festival around here. And boy, it's good. And it's just, she just takes the tomatoes, peels them, cores them, and cooks them down. No seasoning, no salt, no herbs, no spices. You can always add that later. So this is the time of year. Once a few years ago, on a dare, I actually went the whole month of August without eating any meat. And, when you've got a wonderful garden like she grows, you don't need to. But I got to tell you, by the end of the month, the last week, my stomach was doing backflips. It was not happy. I was, getting cramps and stuff. It's kind of funny. Mike Whitman, if I pulled my brisket too early and it's tough, can I put it back in the smoker after it's cooled or a crock pot? Yeah, I think so. You're in repair mode, but the whole idea. Well, first of all, why is brisket tough? Let's start with the fact that it's just a really tough cut of meat. There's just a lot of connective tissue. That is, every muscle fiber, which is a long tube, has a connective tissue wrapped around it. And that is tough. We sometimes call it gristle, but collagen is what it's made out of. And it melts after many, many hours of low and slow cooking, and it gets tender and succulent and juicy. But if you've got a really tough, ornery piece of brisket, maybe from a bull, maybe, they do grade brisket like they do other cuts of meat. And, USDA Prime is going to be better than USDA Choice or other grades. If you've got just an ornery, tough piece of meat, you're not going to be able to do much to salvage it. But if you did, as you think you may have, pulled it too early, putting it back on at low and slow can make a difference. But you're going to have to warm it all the way up to a couple of 100 degrees, and that's going to take hours. So you may not be eating it tonight, dude. I mean, you're pretty much like back to cooking it from scratch. But you can give it a try, and you may in fact salvage it. And I'd say there's a good chance you can. Now, you mentioned crock pot. You can throw it in the crock pot, and that's a different style of cooking. Throwing it on a smoker is warm air. Warm air doesn't transmit a lot of energy. But throwing in a crock pot, you're now braising it, which means it's surrounded mostly, not all the way, mostly by water. Water conducts energy better and more evenly. So that may be a good solution. Faster solution in any case. Jim Cheshire doing a reverse here strip name. Well, what the heck are you doing online with us? Man, that strip steak is going to be ready any minute. Jean-Marc, good to see you again. Gary Lazarus, what tomatoes are preferred? She has never gotten into these heritage breeds, the purple ones or the black ones. She grows Romas and beefsteaks and variations like those. And the beefsteaks we use for slicing and sandwiches and oh man, a tomato sandwich I just love. For lunch, go out and pick a few leaves of basil, rip them to shreds, take a beefsteak tomato, cut it into thick slices, get some nice whole grain bread or even just a good Italian bread and toast it, hit it with some mayonnaise, lay on the tomato slices and the basil, and boy, that is just marvelous stuff. The Romas have less juice, they're less watery, and those she tends to prefer for canning. So for things like caprese salad and sandwiches, she prefers the beefsteaks, the Better Boys, those varieties. She may be experimenting with some others, I'm not entirely sure. Gary Lazarus, don't kiss up to me by telling me you think I've lost weight. I wish it were true. I just had my physical yesterday, and my doctor, kind of gently bitch slapped me. But I'm in an interesting phase of my life. Oh gosh, we're at 00 hour. I've lost track of time. Wait, I gotta have the official start intro video.
I need ribs to ease my day. I need to find time to cook them right. My papa said, can't hurry ribs. No, you just have to wait. He said ribs.
And now, at your service, here to help you cook and eat like royalty is the barbecue whisperer and hedonism evangelist from AmazingRibs.com, the planet's biggest and baddest barbecue and grilling website, Meathead.
Boiled slabs must I stand before I find the crunch to let me live again. Right now the only thing that keeps me hanging on is a memory of...
Okay. Sorry for the delay there, but that's becoming a new routine here. Right now, this you might be interested in this. Many of you know that my book, That's It Over My Shoulder, Meathead, The Science of Great Barbecue Grilling, it has just crossed the 250,000 copy mark, which makes it, I think, the second largest best-selling barbecue book in history. Number one would be Stephen Reichlin's Barbecue Bible. And I think he's pretty far ahead of me on that. But I'm number two, and I'm gaining on him. And I'm very proud of it. For those of you who haven't seen it, hopefully your library has it, because a lot of libraries bought it. If they haven't, you might convince them to and save yourself the cost of buying it. It runs $20 to $25 on Amazon. Bookstores have it for a little more. If you come to my website, you can order a signed copy. It's pretty cool. The first half of the book is really a science textbook. It talks about what is heat, what is smoke, what is fire, what is energy, what is meat, what is vegetable, what are they made of, all the chemistry and science, physics. And then the second half are recipes that apply the principles. So I'm working on a follow-up. I'm working on a book called The Meathead Method, in which I go into deep dive on my techniques, the methods, the tricks that I use. And right now I'm deep into the final recipe testing in photography. And I did my master's in photography, so I'm doing all the photography. I did all the photography in the last book, which I would grade as C+, but I'm doing the photography in this book, and I grade it as B+. And I'm getting some really nice stuff. And tomorrow, we're doing wok cooking on a charcoal chimney. This is really cool. You can fill a charcoal chimney halfway or more with charcoal and get it really hot. I mean, like a back end of an F-16. And you put a wok on top of that, and you're getting the kinds of temperatures that they get in Chinese restaurants. And I know a lot of us have tried Chinese cooking at home on our stoves, and on a electric stove, it's almost impossible. On a gas stove, it's possible, but you just can't get the energy. But you can on top of a charcoal chimney. So we're doing some recipes tomorrow on a charcoal chimney. We're doing just a basic fried rice, and then we're doing mapo tofu. So I'm doing a tofu dish in my next book. Yeah, Meathead has got a tofu dish in my next book. A lot of fun stuff, a lot of vegetables, a lot of sauces. That's my new baby Labrador Retriever in the background. And so tomorrow we're doing photography on those two dishes and a few others. Should be fun. All right, Gary, I'll tell her about Chipolia tomatoes. Gosh, ideas for what Labor Day weekend cook. Actually, our newsletter, Smoke Signals, if you're not a subscriber, going out any day now with a whole bunch of good ideas. We're kind of focusing on sandwiches this year. But, hey, I'll cook anything, anytime. For Labor Day, my neighbor across the street, he's a musician and sort of a bluegrass kind of guy really good too. And he has all his bluegrass buddies over, and I cook for them. And everybody cooks and brings. There's a lot of good food, like 40, 50 people, a lot of good food. And they all sit in a circle and play. So I'm doing ribs for the gang. Yeah, you know they want my ribs. Group or on a grill recipe. I have your book. Well, look at, Henry Isherwood, look at the recipe that talks about using mayonnaise on the outside of fish, because that's the biggest problem with cooking fish, is it sticks. And I like to get that gadget, I don't know what you call it. It looks like two tennis rackets, and they're hinged at the top. And you swab mayonnaise on the outside of it. First season it, then you swab mayonnaise on it. And the mayonnaise is really just oil. And you're not using it for flavor. In fact, it doesn't contribute much flavor, and most of it melts off. But somehow it's better than just plain oil at keeping it from sticking. And try that. And the key to fish is don't let it go too much beyond 130. 130 internal temperature in the thick parts. And, in general, in fact, that's a magic number for almost everything you're going to cook on the grill. 130 to 135 is the medium rare temperature for a steak, and it's a really good number for almost everything, except chicken. You got to get chicken cooked a little hotter. There's higher incidence of bacterial issues with chicken, and you want to make sure you kill those bastards off. And ground meat. The same issue. But, for fish, lamb, pork, 130 to 135. Now, for pork, many of you may find that a little too rare, or it's actually medium rare. So 140 or so. But I'll tell you, if you've been cooking your pork to 160 to 170, like a lot of books tell you, you've never had pork. Try cooking it to 135 to 145. Little pink in the center, and you will have an entirely different eating experience. It's so good, and it's safe. We haven't had an incident of pork problems from undercooked pork in this country, except for maybe some homegrown pigs, in years. So give it a whirl. Pepperhead, thank you for your compliment. He likes my book, and he's given it as a gift. Don Bacon says, tad late for happy hour? No. What kind of restrictive world are you living in? Here we go. Have myself a nice Alsace Gewürz here. Okay. Yeah, okay, Gary Lazarus, grilled peaches with brown sugar, butter, garlic sauce, ice cream scoop. You're very close to a recipe I just cooked. I grilled some peaches, which is easy to do, and I live in Illinois, and I got to tell you, I've had, I'm an old fart. I've been around. I've had Georgia peaches. I've had Carolina peaches. The key to good fruit is that it needs hot days and cool nights. And that's why a lot of the best grapes come from cool climates, like, Washington State, Germany, Northern California. Michigan peaches, particularly Red Haven, Michigan Freestone peaches. I get them at my farmer's market, are absolutely to die for. And they're so much better than Georgia and Carolina peaches. So I've been eating them, and I grilled some the other day, and I made something like you're talking about with brown sugar and butter and rum and a few other goodies. Oh, and candied pecans with a scoop of ice cream on top. That's going to be in the next book, and that's really good, really good. In fact, I'll probably post that recipe to the Pitmaster Club. For those of you who are members of our Pitmaster Club, I share a lot of the stuff that or some of the stuff, not a lot. I got to do more. Some of the stuff that I'm working on, I share in there before it comes out in the book, and I get great feedback. Darren Wilson. Hey, Darren runs a great website, podcast. And he says, I've inspired him to take my first seasoning ideas to a co-packer. Oh, so you're going to start making your own rubs and seasonings and go in a competition with me. Thank you. And you give me credit for that. Hey, everybody's got rubs and seasonings. And for those of you who are not aware, last year we introduced, if you can see me pointing at them, a barbecue sauce and 3 rubs. And I'm pretty proud of them. They're pretty good. Henry Isherwood wonders if coconut cream works like mayo. I don't know. I don't know much about coconut cream. I've dealt with coconut milk. The key is oil. Oil is pretty non-stick. And mayo is mostly oil. But it's got a lot of air whipped into it. I need to learn more about coconut cream. Try it. Try it. Let me know. Yeah, Jim Cheshire says grind your own meat and it's safer. Not only that, but here's a trick, and I talk about this in the coming book. If you take a piece of, say, chuck meat, usually 80-20 to 70-30 is a good ratio of rare or lean to fat, and get a piece of chuck, which usually runs around 80-20. Dip it in boiling water for 20 to 30 seconds. That kills any bacteria on the surface. And that's where the bacteria lives. They can't get into the muscle unless you've stabbed it or there's a cut. So if you dip it into boiling water, you've pasteurized it. Now you can grind it yourself and then cook it. And if you want it medium rare, you can, and it's safe. Normally, you got to cook ground meat, and I strongly recommend you cook ground meat that you buy to 155 to be safe. You don't want to screw around with E. coli. It is just scary, and it can kill. And you don't want to give it to your kids, your granny, or even, young and healthy. So, but dunking it in boiling water will pasteurize it. Yeah, Gary Lazarus says, I don't think you need to cook the snot out of it. I shoot for 160, which is 5 degrees below what USDA says. But you study the math, and they want a kill rate of 10 to the 7th, but 10 to the 6th is still a lot, very, very few living bacteria, very little risk. And you can cook it at 155 and get pretty darn safe. But 160 is okay. Yes, and you're right, Jason Pettis. The greatest incident of trichinosis now is bear meat, not pork. By no means pork. Yeah, Gary, I know it's overdue. I'm working on it. It's going to be good. I'm very proud of it. I've made great progress. It'll be done. Darren says blueberry and black garlic is one of my first. You mean a sauce? Dude, if you folks have not discovered black garlic, I've got a couple of recipes in the book about it. It's expensive. You can get it on Amazon. You can find it in gourmet stores. Basically, it's a form of aged garlic. And they say it's pretty easy to make. I haven't tried it. I've been buying it. It's very soft and squishy, and and if you try to chop it, it's kind of mushy. But it's kind of like it has some of the richness and sweetness of a balsamic vinegar, a raisininess, a little prune-like character. It's really extraordinary. It has very little to do with what you expect garlic to taste like, and it's a lot of fun. I have a recipe for scallops with butter and black garlic sauce that is really killer. Jim Cheshire says his battery is dying and he's out of here. Good to see you, though. Thanks for coming by. Well, we're ramping into questions and answers here. I wanted to touch on a subject. I usually launch these things with a bit of a monologue, a little bit of a talk on a subject that I think is interesting. And I was talking on Greg Rempe's show last week. Greg Rempe has a podcast, and I'm on there every month. And we were talking about water pans. And for many people who've started out smoking, many of us started with the Weber Smoky Mountain, which is a bullet smoker. It's a vertical tube and it has a water pan in there. And a lot of people have the wrong idea of how it works. And it's really interesting. These water pans, and you should put them into your smokers in most cases, they don't really raise the humidity of the atmosphere inside the cooker. A lot of people think it does. It makes it more humid in there, and therefore it reduces the amount of evaporation from the meat. Meat's 75% water. It's heating up. A lot of water evaporates, and the meat dries out. And so if you put a water pan, they think you're going to prevent that. You're not. You're not. The water pan does not do much in the way of reducing evaporation or preventing drying out. And that's because when you're burning charcoal or gas or wood, you're burning up a lot of oxygen. It's pulling in from the air surrounding your cooker a heck of a lot of oxygen. And that oxygen contains moisture, but it's so little. I mean, it blows through. If you've got a cooker with a chimney, you hold your hand above that chimney. It's coming through there at a very high rate. That water pan cannot, under any circumstances on this planet, put enough moisture in the air to add humidity to the atmosphere in that cooker. What it does do, though, is its water sink is a heat sink. Water cannot go above 212 degrees without steaming. I mean, you can't get water up to 250 under normal circumstances. 212 is as high as it goes. So it will steam a little bit, but it really won't boil much unless you've got a lot of charcoal underneath. That steam is not enough to moisturize the atmosphere. What it can do is if you take the meat out of the fridge and put it in the smoker, the differential between the warm air in the smoker and the temperature of the meat comes out at 38 degrees out of the refrigerator. The warm air in the smoker should be a minimum of 225. Huge differential. The moisture will condense on the cold meat. Just like when you get out of the shower, the steam or the moisture from the shower condenses on your mirror. So the moisture condenses on that cold meat. And that keeps the meat moist, not enough to keep it from drying out, but it makes the surface wet and sticky. And smoke sticks to wet surfaces. Smoke's got a lot of particles in it, a lot of gases in it, and it makes it more sticky. And so you'll get smokier meat if you've got a water pan in there. The other thing it does is because it doesn't go above 212, is it helps moderate the temperature. So if your charcoal is overcooked, is over temperature, it's running hot, it will help stabilize the temperature at a lower temp. So if you put a water pan between the charcoal and the meat, it will keep that temperature down a bit. So water pans are a really good thing to have, but they're not a real good hedge against moisture and drying out. Yeah, Urban Street Grill is asking about if there's a really good way to crisp up chicken skins while smoking whole chickens. Yeah, it's tricky. In competition, they like to have what they call bite-through skin. And to them, the skin is soft. So when you bite in, your teeth go all the way through, and you don't pull all the skin off the meat. Personally, I like the skin crispy. I mean, it's, right up there with bacon. I like it, and the ultimate way to do that is in a convection oven. If you've got a convection oven at home, you throw your chicken there and you get really good crispy skin. But there's ways to help that. And one of the ways to help that is a day or two before you start cooking is put the chicken in the fridge without a cover on it. Let the skin be bare. And that is going to dehydrate the skin slightly, remove some moisture. Salt it, which will pull some of the moisture out. let it sit there in the fridge. And if you want, if you've got a little fan, and I bought one of those fans that they stuck in computers, and they run like on a battery. And I've got, I have a spare beer fridge in the basement. And I use that for curing meats and stuff like this. So I'll take a chicken, I'll put it down there, and I'll have this little fan running next to it. And it'll just blow air across it. And that helps dry it out with little salt, and helps dry it out. And then reverse sear. That is to say, cook it indirect heat, away from the flame, gently warm it up so that the meat gets up to about 110, 120, 130, and then you move it over direct heat, skin side down, and you stand there, lid up, and watch it. Flip it, flip, 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 and make sure that it doesn't burn, and that will dry out and crisp that skin. And that's a good technique, and you can experiment with that. And I just mentioned the technique. I just published an article. It appears in the Pitmaster Club this week. It won't appear on the website for the public for another couple of days. We always give our members first look at stuff. But I wrote an article on flipping. And this is, I was taught when I was a kid, and I'll bet most of you were taught, you put the meat down and don't flip. Leave it alone. Don't flip. And there's a classic video by Gordon Ramsay out there saying just that. It's a mistake. It's a myth. It's wrong. And the reason is that, all right, let's go back to the beginning. Hot air cooks the outside of the meat. But hot air can't penetrate the meat. Hot air can't cook the inside of the meat. What cooks the inside of the meat? The energy that is stored in the outside of the meat from the hot air. So the hot air cooks the outside of the meat, but the outside of the meat cooks the inside of the meat. Meat's about 75% water. So the hot air stores energy in the outside of the meat. And that energy moves its way slowly towards the center. So if you're on a grill and you have, let's say, a steak, and it's facing the charcoal, that outside is getting nice and brown, and you're building a beautiful crust, and that's what you want. And the energy is getting stored like a battery, like a component in an electronics that stores energy, a capacitor. And it holds that energy and generally, slowly releases it towards the center. And so when you're done, and if then you flip it, say, halfway through, you get a really great dark outside crust. Then you get a layer of brown. Then you get a layer of tan. Then you get a layer of pink. And finally, about half of the meat in the center is perfectly cooked, medium rare, 130 to 135. You've got this rainbow of colors. Now, if you take the meat and you put it on the indirect side, away from the flame, away from the coals, where it's warming gently by circulating air, convection air. So you're going to divide your grill in half. One side's got all the coals or all the flame from your gas grill. The other side has no flame, no coals. And the meat goes on the indirect side, away from the flame and coals, and it's gently warming. And if our target is for perfectly medium rare, which is when it's most tender and most juicy, you're going to take it up to about 120. And it's gently going to warm. And when it hits about 120, it's very even in temperature. It's been slowly roasting, and the temperature has moved gently from side to side. And it's perfectly 120, edge to edge, pretty much. Now you're going to lift the lid, and you're going to move it over to the direct heat side. You're going to give it all she's got, Scotty. You're going to amp it up to warp 10. And you're going to take that energy and pound the underside of that steak with as much energy as you can to build that crust. But you're not going to leave it there for long, because if you do, it starts to migrate through and it starts to overcook the meat. You're going to flip it. You're going to flip it after a minute or 2 or 3 at the most. When you flip it, that energy, that heat, instead of going deep into the meat, which is water, it's going to come off into the air. and it's going to prevent the meat from overcooking. And then you're going to flip it again after a couple of minutes at the most. And there's a really good video. Go to the website of Combustion Inc. Not Steve Young. Chris Young. Chris Young is the inventor of a really impressive new thermometer that just started shipping this month. It's like $200. But it's a very impressive thermometer, and I'll let him do all the promotional on his website, Combustion Inc. But go to YouTube and look at Combustion Inc. and watch his video about flipping, because he does a demonstration. And I've been writing about this for years. And he shows you how flipping it every minute, and that's too much. That's too much energy. But he's proving a point. The meat cooks faster, like it's 20 to 30% faster. And it's more evenly cooked. And you get a great crust. So constantly flipping, I've been writing about this for years, is the better approach. And his video really does a great job of demonstrating. The great god of all of us food geeks is Harold McGee, a food scientist, and he wrote it in his book and back in 1999 to keep flipping. And then Kenji Lopez-Alt wrote about it also, and I've written about it multiple times. It's a great technique. Okay, let's see. I'm scrolling back up to see if the question. Okay, blue ring garlic, coconut. Jean-Marc Demare, wish you could get my rubs up above the 49th parallel. Yeah, eventually. We can ship them to a friend in the States, and they can ship it to you. Yeah, it's an issue. We're trying to work it out. Gary Lazarus says dark meat 185. I think 170 is I think we're talking chicken. I like 170, but I know a lot of competition cooks take it up to like 190 or 200. Why not? Gary says he makes my recipe for KC sauce all the time, and his friends rave and review. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. And I'm very proud of our bottled version, which is a little different. There's a secret ingredient. Jay Presser, I didn't know this, Jay. You can buy a black garlic fermenter for about $90, and in 12 days you have black garlic, and it looks like a rice cooker? Wow. $90 seems a bit steep, but black garlic ain't cheap, and if you're addicted to it like I am, you could probably pay for this thing in a few months. I'm going to have to look into that. Pura Leña is from Spain. Greetings. A great fan. I have traveled extensively in your country, and there are damn few countries that know how to cook like Spain. Everybody talks about France and China, but the Spanish, particularly you get down into Barcelona, I mean, I have just had more fun eating. And their use of olive oil, and nobody fries better than the people in Barcelona. Yeah, I'm with you, pal. Gee, Gary Lazarus asks about the best way to keep ribs moist. Keep the temperature low when you're cooking. I'm a big fan of 225. And just don't overcook. I have an article on how to tell when they're done. There's something called the bend test, where you pick it up with your tongues, and if it cracks, it's done. You got to experiment. I usually go towards St. Louis cut or spare ribs, which are fattier. You know, moisture is something we talk about. Most of us think about water as the measure of moistureness. You know, so how moist is the meat? Well, how much water is in there? But when it comes to things like ribs and pulled pork and brisket, it's not just the water content that makes it moist. It's the melted fat and the melted collagens, the connective tissues, that all contribute to it. So for me, keep it low and slow. I know that a lot of folks are cooking hotter and faster nowadays, but keep it low or slow. And Henry Isherwood's asking about water pans with ribs. A lot of it depends on your cooker, Henry. Some cookers, it's not as necessary. But generally, I like water pans in there. They are putting moisture in the air. They're not raising the humidity much. But that moisture is landing on the meat and helping the meat cool and helping retain smoke. Hello, Kevin Liddell. It's good to see you back. Yeah, Jason Pettis is saying he's running his Weber Smoky Mountain open on the top and bottom with water in the pan. And it would stay around 275. So I'm guessing you have the big one. You have the 22.5-incher. The 22.5-incher likes to be around 275. It settles in there nice and neatly and nestles. And that's not a bad temp. I prefer 225. And the 18-incher, the smaller unit, likes to nestle in at 225. So I slightly prefer the smaller Weber Smoky Mountain, but I've had the bigger one, and I cooked some awfully good meat on it at 275. And a lot of competition cooks cook up at that temp. It's not a huge difference. Pure Elena, our friend from Spain, is asking, what about the short and hot boosts in a rotisserie? Just enough to give high heat on the skin, but not enough energy to penetrate. Good point. Yeah, rotisserie is a really interesting thing, and I wrote about this in my article about keep flipping. I say, you be the human rotisserie. Keep flipping. Because what you get is this, what the scientists call a sinusoidal wave. It goes up, it comes down. It goes up, it comes down. And so as it rotates in front of the rotisserie, it's exposed to the heat, it gets hot, then it rotates away and it cools off. But it's not a huge difference, and it's almost like cooking it evenly on all sides. And that's nice. I mean, what if you had a cooker that surrounded a piece of chicken, for example, a roast chicken, on all sides with even heat? And that's what rotisserie kind of does. It kind of hits it on all sides evenly. And rotisserie is a great way to get crispy skin. There's a gadget. Sit tight. I'm getting up for a second. I'm going to show it to you. How about that camera of mine that follows me? I don't have an assistant. This is called TurboQ. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's a little motor on one side and a fan on the other. And does that motor look familiar? That's the same motor that you put in the rotisserie. So you put this thing, and it clips into the rotisserie holder on a gas grill. And then this axle, goes through the rotisserie hole and inside the grill. So this is, my fingers now are the exterior, let's see. Here's the exterior wall of the grill, right? My hand is the exterior wall of the grill. And the motor is on the outside, the fan's on the inside. And it's battery operated, and it blows air through. It turns your gas grill into a pretty decent convection oven. Now, a great deal of convection cooking, let's just clarify some terminology, just is about air flowing around food. In fact, frying is a form of convection cooking because you put food into oil and the oil circulates and cooks it by convection flow. But most of us think of air. A convection oven is an oven that has a fan built in. And that fan blows the air around. And what it does is when you put cold meat into an oven, it has a bubble of cold air around it. And the hot air struggles to break through that cold air bubble. But if you turn a fan on it, it blows that cold air bubble away. And it keeps moving warm air around the meat. So when your convection oven is working, It cooks the meat faster by making sure there's more warm air in contact with it. And that's what happens here. Unfortunately, they stopped making these things. It's called the Turbo Q. And you might be able to find one on Amazon or on eBay. Let me just make sure that's not... I'm going to just... It's a spam call. From Springfield, Illinois. You know what that means? It's a politician. So you may be able to find it somewhere out there, eBay or Amazon, and if you can't, if somebody listening in is a manufacturer, I think this thing has a future. I'd love to see somebody build these. They look pretty simple. It's just a little electric motor with a fan. And the fan's in a metal cage. There's no plastic here because it'd melt. And I just think it's really cool. And I've used this not only on chicken, but on pizza. Because it blows hot air across the top of the pizza and other things. It's just a really cool device. And I have one and you don't. And it's going to be hard for you to get one. But it's a really cool idea. If you can rig one up, figure it out, let me know. I'm reading your questions. Yeah, Mark Fowler says, I hate grill marks. Good. I've been preaching that for a long time. Grill marks are when the meat has gotten a nice, good brown Maillard reaction. But in between the grill marks, it hasn't. And, we're trained, and a lot of the chefs on TV tell you, okay, you lay the meat down, and after a few minutes, you pick it up, turn it 45 degrees, and lay it down, and you get this nice cross-hatching. And a lot of steak competitions want those perfect grill marks. And I'm sorry, I think that's a mistake. Yeah, Egter is asking about resting meat. I am a bit of a contrarian, and every chef on the face of the earth except me says rest your meat. That is, you take it off and you let it sit and rest. And I'm not convinced, but I can't prove my beliefs. I have some kitchen science questionable evidence that it's not necessary, but I can't prove definitively. Here's what the chefs say. When you take the meat off the grill or out of the oven or out of the pan, it's hot, and you need to let it sit for the juices to redistribute. And now there's other arguments, and I'll get to them in a minute, but the redistribute is the common one. The juices inside of meat are mostly held within muscle fibers or in between muscle fibers. They don't move around much. There's no highways in between the surface of the meat and the center of the meat. So it's not like it moves to the surface and then you take it off and it goes back to the center. I've never seen evidence that it does. And I've never seen a paper in any scientific journal, and I've searched, and I've paid food scientists to search. And we can't find any evidence that that actually happens. But that's what a lot of really good chefs believe. Now, I know that I have a great deal of respect for great chefs. But I also know that a lot of great chefs hold on to myths which we have proven to be wrong. And I suspect this may be one of them. Now, the other thing that they cling on to about resting is that if you take the meat hot off the grill and cut into it, a lot more juice comes out than if you let it rest. This we've tested in the kitchen, and Professor Blonder and I have both done these tests, and it's true, but it's not entirely true. A slight amount more, not a significant amount. There's a very slight amount more moisture comes out if you take it off the grill hot and cut into it. A very slight amount, like maybe a tablespoon on a steak. But guess what? That's on a steak where you take it off and you cut it all up. Nobody cuts it all up. When you eat a steak, you cut one little slice off. You take a bite. Then you get a glass of wine. You take a sip. Then you get for the string beans, and you take a sip. Then you go for the potatoes, and you take a bite. And by the time you get back to the steak, the tests show after about 15 minutes, this juice loss disappears. So I don't think that in real world, there's a significant loss. But guess what? When you cut into meat and there's juice that spills out, and you've got a piece of meat on your fork, what do you do with it? You mop it up. You run the meat through the juice, and guess what? It sucks it right up. The meat just sucks up that juice. You don't waste it. Nobody turns in a plate at the end of dinner swimming in beef juice. The plate's always dry. You mop it up with the meat or with the mashed potato. It's just not wasted. So it's not gone. So again, I think this juice loss business is another question that hasn't been proven. And actually, I think it's been semi-proven by me and Professor Blonder and a few others. So I'm just not sure. So I'm not going to stick my neck out and say it's a myth, because I won't call something a myth unless I can prove it's to be a myth. But I'm pretty sure that this is bordering on mythology. And the other thing is a great deal of the moisture effect. When you eat meat and you want it really moist, remember, moisture is not just water, which is what comes out when you cut it. It's fat and melted collagen and one other thing. Saliva. And if you put a sizzling steak in front of me, hot off the grill, I am foaming at the mouth. You bring a steak off the grill and let it sit in the kitchen for 15 minutes, you're not going to get me foaming at the mouth. If I see sizzling, oh my goodness, that gets the juices flowing. And I think that saliva is important for the moisture effect. So I am not in the crowd that says let meat rest. Now, I differentiate between resting and holding. Now, when we're talking about a steak, which we cook to 135, or even a piece of chicken cooked to 155, 160, it's a lot different than talking about a brisket that we cooked to 203. Big difference between 130 and 203. When you take a brisket off, I have seen this proven, and I believe this to be true. If you take a brisket off at 203, which is a good number to shoot for, and wrap it in foil and a blanket and stick it in a beer cooler or what they call a Cambro, which is a styrofoam box, and let it sit there for an hour or so, is what they call carryover cooking. The meat continues to cook from this energy stored inside. And I have seen this in effect, and I believe that absolutely, positively impacts the meat. And competition cooks who do that with brisket and pulled pork and a few other cuts, it makes a difference, and you can score brownie points with it. So resting a steak and holding a brisket are two entirely different phenomenon because of the temperatures involved. I'm a big believer in holding a brisket, but not resting a steak. So that's just me. Henry Isherwood asked, what don't I use water on? Well, when I'm cooking hot and fast, I don't think it makes a big difference. So if I'm doing a steak, I don't usually have a water pan in there. I don't want to keep the temperature down. If I'm cooking low and slow, I want to keep the temperature stable and down. So, low and slow foods, yeah, I like them a lot. What are my thoughts on baking powder for crispy chicken skin? I've fiddled with baking powder and baking soda on chicken skin. It's something Kenji Lopez-Alt has talked about and a few others. I find that if you're not careful, it makes it taste metallic. It can help, but you've got to go really light. You've got to find the right balance of it, and I don't know what the percentage is, but just go light. And I'm fiddling with that, and I'll try to have something more about it in my next book. Yeah, Mark Fowler is saying, if you reverse sear to thick steak, you can rest while you crank the temperature. Otherwise, you should rest all meats as the muscles need to relax and redistribute the juices. I don't believe it. And I think I just spoke about that. Prove it. Show it to me. Prove it. I can't get anybody to prove it. I've challenged chefs, talented cooks. Prove it. And if you can't prove it yourself, go to the literature. There are food science departments in every agricultural institute in this country. There's nothing on the subject. I can't find any evidence. Prove it. Gary Lazarus asks about foil wrap. Yeah, wrapping things like ribs, brisket, pulled pork in foil when they get about halfway through the cooking process up into where they're hitting the stall. There's good evidence that helps. But when you wrap things in foil, it speeds the cooking, it improves moisture, but it really mucks up the bark. And if you like crispy, crunchy bark, you're not going to get it. What's my opinion on the large? Donald Gregory Williamson's asking, what's my opinion on large smokers made out of propane tanks? Well, I mean, some of the best cooks in the world are using them. I mean, Aaron Franklin at Franklin Barbecue uses them. They work fantastically if you know how to manage them. There is a skill to managing the temperature control in those pits. And I've seen them all over, and particularly in Texas. They were originally used by the wranglers at the oil fields. They would use pipes, oil pipes, and turn them into barbecue pits, or then use propane tanks. Excuse me. They make incredibly good cookers, but you really have to manage your temperature, your airflow, a lot of stuff. I mean, this is where you go from craft to art. And Kevin's asking, what is that camera? It's called an OBSBot, and it follows me. And it'd be really handy if I had like a blackboard and I wanted to get up and do a demo on the blackboard. So if you have to do demos and stuff like that, really cool for that sort of thing. I've been thinking about doing a blackboard in here, but I just have never gotten around to it. Gary's asking about rotisserie for ribs. No, I've never done it. I don't think it's necessary. Zachary Good, is it worth rebuilding an old Brinklin 4-burner gas grill, replacing rusted gas pipes, shields, etc.? Gosh, that's hard to answer. You know, I mean, it would talk about how much it's going to cost you to do all that. And when it's done, how well does it cook? I will say this. All grills and smoker technologies have really progressed in the past 10 years. And there's a lot of cool technology out there now. So if you can afford a new grill, you might consider it, because there's some really neat stuff out there, like on a gas grill. The Napoleon 500, which I tested a while ago, has a side burner that is an infrared burner, and it's effing awesome. It will sear a steak in 30 seconds. You can also use it for keeping your sauces warm. I mean, it's just a great thing. So, it might be worth it. It's really hard to answer from here, pal. Sorry. Jason's asking, how's the device spelled? I think you're talking about this guy here. It's called the Turbo Q. TurboQue. Can you see that? Turbo Q. And they stopped making them a couple of years ago, but I think I saw them on Amazon not too long ago. I don't know where you're going to find one, but they're pretty cool. Matt Drouard's asking, can my refrigerator pickle recipe used for banana peppers? Yes, I've done it myself. I've done it with a variety of peppers. And there's a couple of different pepper recipes. But yes, it works just fine. You may want to adjust the amount of salt and vinegar and sugar to make your taste. But yeah, it works just fine. I mean, the basic core concept is you make your brine. You mix your vinegar, your sugar, and your salt, and you make sure you got enough of it. And you start with my recipe, taste it, and see if that tastes like a good brine to you. And then you bring it to a boil. And then you pour it into a jelly jar that's really clean. And then you put the chopped up peppers or tomatoes or celery or whatever you want to pickle in there. And close the lid. Let it cool a little bit because you don't want to put a really hot bottle in the fridge. It'll warm your fridge. Let it come to room temp for a little while with the lid on, and then put it in the fridge. It's got to stay in the fridge because there's no preservatives in there. Although actually the salt, pepper, and sugar are pretty good at preserving. But I keep them in the fridge. And I just did a batch of jalapenos. My wife brought some in the other day from her garden. And I had a bottle of jalapenos that I pickled like months ago, and just did exactly that. I added it to the jar, and they're great. It takes maybe a day before they're good and pickled, and actually after an hour or two you can start eating them because they pickle quickly. They're called quick pickles, but it takes a day or two for them to thoroughly pickle, and I usually wait like a week to make sure they're really stable and pickle. And I've never had any spoil, and they turn out great. Yeah, Cat Steele is talking about the KFC secret recipe. There's been a number of people who believe they have the ingredients, and actually the Chicago Tribune a couple of years ago went down to interview one of the early members of the KFC team, and he or she, I forget, had a envelope that purported to have the recipe written on it, and it seemed to be valid. You know, I've done fried chicken. And by the way, I am a strong advocate. Everybody loves fried chicken, right? Raise your hand if you like fried chicken. All of your hands just went up. Why don't you do it at home? Because it smokes up the kitchen, sets off the smoke alarm, spatters all over the kitchen counters, and after you're done, it's an hour of cleanup, and then you got to sleep on the couch. Do it on your gas grill. Now, I know you're going to say, what? That's a fire hazard. It's no more a fire hazard than cooking it on your stovetop. I mean, if your stove catches on fire, you lose your house. If your grill catches on fire, you lose a $500 grill. But it's not going to happen. Get yourself a Dutch oven, 1 or 2 gallons. You put an inch or two of oil in the bottom. You get it up to 375. That's your rough magic temperature for frying. And then it becomes a question of how do you treat the chicken. And I've done it all. I've done buttermilk, I've done eggs, I've done, all the different breadcrumbs and cereal crumbs and stuff. And I got to tell you, just start with this. Take your piece of chicken, wet the surface. Go to the sink, get your hands wet, pat the chicken, and roll it around in flour, all-purpose flour. That's all you got to do. You don't need to go into an egg dip. then do a breadcrumb and the flour and all that stuff. Just get a flour coat on it. Get your oil up to 375. Drop your pieces of chicken in there. Don't get it too crowded. Keep the temperature up. And when they're beautiful and golden, take them off and put them on the other side of the grill. Keep the lid closed, because if they're not cooked thoroughly, you want them to 160, and sometimes they're only 150 or so. When they're sitting there on the grill, they're drip drying and they're continuing to cook internally. And they're spectacular. They're delicious. And don't put salt and pepper in the flour. Put it on the meat. Put your seasoning on the meat. Don't waste it in the flour, because half the flour you're going to throw out anyhow. Now, if you want to do the classic 3-part dip, which is flour, then egg, then breadcrumbs, go right ahead. But I find that the egg, or if you're using, what do they call it? The milk, buttermilk. It tends to brown very quickly. And so you get brown crust before the chicken is thoroughly cooked. And you want to cook it to 160. So I don't even bother with that, frankly, anymore. Now, I have had very good luck with marinating the chicken first in a watered-down vinegar and salt. Now, salt is a brine, and it goes in and it moisturizes the meat and helps. Salt's the magic rock, and I've written about this. Salt helps meat hold on to moisture. But when you do a little vinegar in there, you get that vinegar potato chip taste, which I kind of like. A lot of people like to do pickle brine for brining. Well, it's the same effect. Basically, pickle brine is just vinegar and salt. So if you marinate it for an hour or so in a diluted vinegar and salt solution, or pickle brine, next time you finish a jar of dill pickles, don't throw out the brine. Dunk your chicken in there for an hour. Then roll it in flour. Get a nice coat on. Shake off the extra. 375 until golden. Take it off. Let it sit on the grill. Take the temperature. When it's 150, enjoy. It's marvelous. And I've written about this at length on AmazingRibs.com. And I'll have more in my new book. But you can do all manner of deep frying on your grill. If you haven't, at least 2 burners. One burner under the pot. Use a Dutch oven. So if it spatters, who cares? It's not going to spatter over the top of a big Dutch oven. And even if it smokes, you're outdoors. Who cares if it smokes? Do it indoors and you're going to smoke up the house. You're going to set off the smoke alarms. You're going to make a terrible mess. It works marvelously, and you can have fried chicken every week. And it's so much better than KFC. And then you can riff. You can start putting seasonings on there. You can put things in. You can put chipotle in there. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. Gary Hammond says he's looking for my first all-purpose smoker. I really can't talk about that directly right now because so much of it has to do with how much are you willing to spend? What kind of things do you like to cook? What's the largest number of people you normally cook for? Do you have a big 4th of July party where you've got to cook for 20 people? Or is it just for you and your wife? Or do you have 4 kids? So those kinds of questions, bring them to AmazingRibs.com. Go to our grill, and we have a guy full-time, Max Good. All he does for us is test grills and smokers. There's nobody in the world who does this for a living but Max. And he works for us. You won't find ratings and reviews anywhere else on any website as thorough and professional as the ones he does. So go to our website, use the search box, select the smoker option, and then you can check off how much you're willing to spend, what your capacity is. Look at the options, and you'll probably find exactly what you're looking for. And if you get it down to 2 or 3 and you can't make up your mind, ask Max a question. Post your question. He'll hold your hand and guide you. But I can't do that here. That's like, I'm looking for a car. What should I buy? Well, get a Rolls Royce. That's what I would get. I can't tell you that. Jean Valjean from Tulsa. I'm scared of you, Jean Valjean. I'm running for the hills now. I know you've spoken about the Hasty Bake, and I've owned a few. Have you tested the 357? Yes, I have one in my yard. It is quite a price jump, yes. It's really expensive. It is, I think, the best charcoal grill on the market, period. I just love it to death. I don't use it a lot because it's just my wife and I now. And so it's really easy for me to grab the Weber kettle and get 90% of what I need done on that. But it's also, I couldn't get it up the stairs onto my deck where it's really handy. So it's kind of out of my reach. But it can do it all. It can grill. It can smoke. It can do large quantities, small quantities. There's just nothing like it. And you'll put it in your will, and your kids will inherit it because it's going to outlast you. It's called the Hasty Bake 357, and it's just an amazing machine. And I'm not going to get into the specifics. We have a very detailed review of this machine on AmazingRibs.com. I mentioned Max Good, who tests grills for smokers, but I did the review on this one, and it's just, it's breathtaking. I love it. Yeah, Putter Elena, he's talking about crispy skin and scrape the skin before drying. All right, now you're talking about the kind of machinations that competition cooks go to. There's a show on the Food Network right now about barbecue competitions. Chef Michael Simon goes to a bunch of barbecue competitions and shows how they cook. And we've written about competition cooking. And the way a lot of competition cooks work, they cook thighs because thighs are more forgiving than breasts. Breasts, there's not much fat and nor as much flavor as there is thighs. And many of them will actually peel the skin back and scrape the fat off from the underside, then peel the skin down. But they're not getting crispy skin. They're getting what they call bite-through skin. So when you bite, your teeth go through. The worst thing in competition judging is if you bite into a chicken thigh and all the skin comes off in the first bite. That's the kiss of death, and you don't win any money. So they want, when you bite down, your teeth go through the skin, and you get a mix of skin and meat. And that's the target. And then one of the tricks they use is to scrape the fat from the underside. But you got soft skin. You don't have crisp skin. I like crisp skin. Yeah, Cat Steele asking that. This is the $64,000 question. When you do deep frying on a gas grill, what do you do with the old oil? You know, if you've only cooked like a few, pieces of chicken, you can filter or strain the oil and use it again once or twice. But after a while, that oil gets to have a bad flavor. Actually, slightly used oil is better than new oil, but it gets old quick. And then you got to get rid of it. And you don't want to dump it down your sink drain because it can cause what they call fatbergs. It mixes with the hair that comes out of your shower and other stuff. And it can solidify and can block up pipes, maybe not just from your house, but from the neighborhood. There are a couple of things. I mean, you can just pour it into a plastic jug or a wine bottle and put it in the trash. It's not ideal, but it'll go to the landfill. I happen to live just a few blocks from a small restaurant row. There's like 5 restaurants in a little area there. And a couple of them have oil tanks out back. A lot of restaurants who have fryers will take that fry oil after it wears out, and they'll dump it in a tank out back, and companies come along and take that oil. They'll collect it. Sometimes they buy it from the restaurant. Sometimes they just collect it to get it off their hands, where it then can be purified, refined, or turned into, I think it can be used for diesel engines. I don't know for a fact if that's true. But they can recycle it, reuse it. And I've talked to a couple of the restaurants. Often it's under lock and key, but occasionally the lid's loose, and I'll go back there and just dump my oil in with theirs, and they don't mind. In fact, it's okay with them. But you don't want to dump it down the drain if you can avoid it. Jason Pettis, if I tried adding tarragon on my barbecue sauce, I'm a big tarragon fan. I use it on almost all my seafood dishes. It's really good on poultry. I have not used it in my barbecue sauce. I could. I love thyme as well, and thyme is sort of my all-purpose everything spice herb, and I use that on a lot of things. Kevin Liddell says he has a Hasty Bake 357 also, and he calls it a Magnum. I think that's an endorsement. Oh, Ryan, that's an interesting question. Can I describe the difference in flavor I get from using charcoal in a two-zone setup with wood chunks versus a properly used good offset? Is it night and day? Let me try to get at that. I think when it comes to smoking meats, the best flavors I have gotten are from cooking with logs that have burned down to embers, not just throwing logs on and setting them on fire. That is an unpleasant flavor. But starting the logs off to the side or in the cooker and let them burn down to embers before the meat goes on. You can add a log or two at a time, but not a lot. I have a Karubaku, which is a log burner. It's a very weird one, too, but I'm not going to get into its nature, but it's awesome. Karubecue. Karubecue. It's a log burner. And it produces the best flavored meats I've ever had. But cooking on charcoal with wood chunks can produce really nice tasting meat. I think in side-by-side comparison tasting with money on the line, I'd go for the log cooker. But, cooking with logs is not easy. It requires a lot of time and effort. You got to nurture the fire. The Karubaku, you just got to sit there and drink a lot of beer and read a book and just sit there. You just can't get up. You got enough time to go pee, but that's about it. Henry Isherwood says he used the upper rack on a gas grill for crispy. Yeah, I think a direct heat is really good for getting things crispy. James Carlin says, dump the oil over the fence into your neighbor's flower bed. Yeah, that'll work. That'll have all the raccoons and dogs in the neighborhood. Good Lord, Roman Matia is checking in from Singapore. Hello, Roman. Yeah, Puterlena is talking about how chickens are handled in Europe and cold temperature baths and stuff. And you're getting really deep into stuff. I'm not going to bother how our chicken processing and your chicken processing is different. I don't know a lot about yours. Yeah, Kevin Liddell says a lot of fryer oil is recycled used in pet food or cosmetics. I didn't know it was in cosmetics. I knew it got into pet food, and I'm a little nervous about that. I don't know how many of you know, but I train leader dogs for the blind as a hobby, and my wife and I have trained 7 of them, and they go out and drag blind people around. And we're into dogs, and we've had a few pets and others who, when I was a kid, dogs never got cancer. Now they do. And I just have to wonder if this fryer oil in their food is a factor. Excuse me. Jason Pettis is saying tarragon was the secret in Blues Hog. Blues Hog is a really great barbecue sauce that a lot of people on the competition circuit use. And the Blues Hog team won Memphis in May for the whole hog and the grand prize this year. And he says they're using tarragon. I'm not surprised. I love that stuff. Roman says I make his day. Well, dude, you make my day. All the way from Singapore, thank you. Oh, my God. Tim Morgan's in from New Zealand. Yeah, Ryan's asking, are most vegetables best grilled direct or indirect? Lid on and lid off. Yeah, really good question. I do a lot of vegetables, especially in August, and I tend to grill them on the direct side. I like to see a little char. I mean, meats are 70%, 75% water. Vegetables are 85 to 90% water. Mushrooms are 90 to 95% water. So they can take high heat. And I like a little bit of char on them. So I often do them direct. And I do them often with the lid on. In fact, tonight we had some pork chops and I grilled some onion and some peppers. And they grilled lid open on the direct side. Well, I think we've more or less hit the end here. Purelania, I appreciate your offer to explain more about how chickens are processed in Spain. And I'd like to learn more. If you want to write me an email, I'm meathead@amazingribs.com. But I don't know that that's a topic for tonight when we have folks from all over the world. I don't think it's terribly hard to get a good crispy chicken skin. Some of the techniques I mentioned work just fine. Scraping the outer part, the under parts, and we're getting a little esoteric. And Henry's checking in from New York. Thank you, Henry. Well, we've been at it for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I've been usually going 90 minutes or so on these, but I'm getting to be an old fart. I get sleepy earlier, and sometimes I'm not sleeping as well as I should at night, and I'm kind of drowsy. So last call for questions here. And otherwise, we'll call it a night. Anybody got something that's really nagging them? Thank you, Pepperhead. He says he can't wait for the new book. Well, if that's the case, then I thank you so much for attending. I always enjoy this. This keeps me in touch with what real people want to know rather than the esoteric barbecue competitors and stuff. And I enjoy chatting with you and seeing the regulars like Kevin and the others every month. And thanks for coming back. I'm here last Thursday of the month every month, except once when I've slept through it. And I'll be back next month. So we'll see you then. Otherwise, if you have more questions, come on down to AmazingRibs.com. Ask your questions there. And if you feel like you want to have some fun, check out our Rubs and Sauce or my book. And we'll see you next month.
That's all for now, folks. Thanks for staying awake, and please visit AmazingRibs.com for the articles, recipes, and reviews mentioned in this chat with the Barbecue Whisperer and Hedonism Evangelist from AmazingRibs.com, the planet's biggest and baddest barbecue and grilling website, Meathead.
It's a game of time and time. You can hurry, ribs. No, you just have to wait. Just trust in the